It's day 74 of the Gulf oil spill, and oil continues to pour out of the damaged BP Deepwater Horizon Well. How much oil is currently flowing? What do the current weather patterns mean for the repair and cleanup efforts? And where do we stand on the government's ban on offshore oil drilling? Tonight, economy, ecology, and our environment in the Gulf. I'm Ernie Manouse, and this is Houston 8. As day 74 of the BP oil crisis draws to a close, the damage continues to pile up. The answers are few and far between, and yet the work goes on. Day 64, close to 26,000 barrels of oil, or a little over 1 million gallons, are recovered in the previous 24 hours, the most since this ordeal began, but still less than half of the oil escaping from the well. That same day, a federal judge in New Orleans blocked a 6-month presidential moratorium on offshore oil drilling. The White House immediately appeals. Day 65, 62 rehabilitated brown pelicans are released at the Aransas National Wildlife Refuge, a small portion of the birds and wildlife harmed by this spill. Day 66, Pensacola Beach is closed when tar balls formed by the spill start to litter the beach. Day 70, BP reports it's spending $100 million a day on the repair and recovery effort. Currently, experts are estimating 40,000 barrels, or nearly 1.7 million gallons of oil, are being lost to the Gulf every day. 74 days, million upon millions of gallons of oil, countless fish and fowl, the lives and livelihoods of many, all lost. All due to one gigantic oil spill. And yet the oil still flows. Joining us tonight are Dr. Michelle Foss, Chief Energy Economist, Program Manager, Bureau of Economic Geology, University of Texas at Austin. Dr. Jeffrey Wozniak, Research Fellow at Texas Research Institute for Environmental Studies, Sam Houston State University. And Dr. Don von Nieuwenhuise, Director, Petroleum Geoscience Program, University of Houston. Welcome to you all, and you all need shorter titles in the future. You are quite an accomplished, yes, you're an accomplished group, and you're here to continue this conversation. We started a couple weeks ago. So much more is going on, more we understand, more problems we're facing. First thing that I hear out in the news all the time, and I want us to straighten it out before we go any further, can it rain oil?
Yes, absolutely, if a tornado picks it up. And we're not going to get rain in the sense of evaporated oil falling out of the sky. But if a tornado or a waterspout picks up columns of water with oil in it, it will also drop the oil down. As many of you have heard in the past, it's actually rained frogs in places. And it's the same kind of phenomenon. So when we have a hurricane come through, any associated tornadoes or waterspouts could actually lift up a lot of these things in the water column and redeposit them from the sky, but it wouldn't be the normal type of rain that you would get from a hurricane or a big thunderstorm.
Jeff, have we seen this happen before?
Well, expanding on what Don said, what you can also see in a large storm event is the wind shear. Wind coming in onshore. Think of a wave cresting, water lifting off the lip of that wave. That could be another avenue to get oil, so to speak, into the atmosphere, then we could see it falling further inland.
Now, I do want to say, as we tape this program, that Alex is just kind of causing its damage as it's moving along in our areas. So we don't know exactly where it's going to be and what it's going to do exactly. But, Michelle, what should we be worried about at this point?
Everything? No, that's not a good enough answer. I realize that. With regard to the hurricane or
to the weather
recovery
patterns,
effort, the political situation.
Outside of the political, because we'll get to that in a second. But as far as the weather pattern and how it's going to affect what's going on and how that
well, I think
specifically.
the biggest thing that everyone is looking at, already boats and people and equipment have been moved away from the spill area, right? So there's a delay. And depending on weather patterns and that sort of thing, the delay could be short or it could be long. But Most people talk about 2 weeks. That means suspending recovery and suspending
cleanup. So what does that actually mean? What's going on then? If they are pulled away...
Well, you have to move away the tankers that are collecting oil.
So where's the oil going then? Are we just spilling back out then into the Gulf?
It's going to spill back into the Gulf until the relief wells that Don will talk about actually hit the mark and we're finally able to be done with this.
And during that 2 weeks... they're not working on those relief wells either, can they be?
That would be true, but that's not happening in the case of this hurricane because it turned more to the west.
That's right.
And they have had to pull in the smaller vessels and that sort of thing that were actually capturing oil and that sort of thing. But the actual containment process is still ongoing. They haven't had to shut that down.
That's right.
And there were a couple of models that suggested that the hurricane was going to turn to the north or to the northeast, which would be right into where we're most worried about it. But even those models showed the hurricane slowing down, giving them a little bit more of a window of time to evacuate things. Now, most of the evacuations have been platforms that are, close to South Texas rather than way over towards the east where the BP blowout is.
We saw just from the hurricanes as they came through, and we've seen them in our own area going through cities and such, that the damage that they cause. With all of these, because we know BP's well that we're talking about today is not the only one out in the Gulf. What happens when these hurricanes go through the Gulf in general? Could we be seeing this kind of accident happening time and time again because of the sheer strength of a hurricane? Or is this situation so unique and this doesn't happen regularly?
Well, a major hurricane necessarily won't cause this type of a mistake to occur. I think Don could probably speak to exactly what happened to cause this error. But what you have to also realize is there is a lot of pollution that is caused through natural seeps, through loss from drilling procedures. I saw a number, 1.3 million metric tons of petroleum products are lost to the environment in marine settings on a year-to-year basis. That's not specifically coming from a storm event. That's just what we find through natural seeps. So could a hurricane increase that flow? It's potential. It's possible, but not necessarily.
Yeah, one of the things that storms can do, because it does suspend operations, if someone was happening to have a problem just prior to a hurricane or even a big storm, it could cause trouble in terms of getting the supplies to the rig that they needed to remediate a problem. For example, the one blowout that I worked on, it actually happened because we were losing mud in the well, and we had run out of mud, and there was a big storm, and we couldn't get a mud vessel out there to resupply the mud supply, and that's why we lost control of the well. And it was really associated with a storm more than anything, more than just a mistake.
But the storm moving through the area will not break down these rigs in such a way that we can...
Yeah, and most of the rigs are designed to withstand hurricane force, and there are certain ones that are not, and they get those out of the way. If you have a drill rig that can't withstand it, they'll have to get that out of the way. But most of the rigs that we have drilling during hurricane season can withstand hurricane forces. Now, we all are familiar with Thunder Horse. That was designed to withstand hurricanes, and of course, when they first installed it, they had a little issue with some of the ballast control systems, and some of the welds apparently didn't hold properly, so they had a rig that was listed after the hurricane passed through. And another thing that happens is some of these vessels, even though they can take a hurricane force and they're designed to be anchored against it, some of the ones that are semi-submersible, for example, that have anchors, the anchors will move, and they've actually cut pipelines in the past. And that gets taken care of relatively quickly, though.
I think one other interesting point to draw attention to is as this storm moves through the Gulf, we're seeing a big change in wind direction. We've been really fortunate through day 74 to not have a direct onshore wind. Wind was usually coming from the west. Now we're in a situation with the storm, with the way it's circulating, we're seeing a wind coming from the south-southeast, and it's actually pushing that oil on the surface more towards the beaches, more towards almost back into Mobile Bay, back in towards those eastern sides, the edge of Louisiana.
So what does that mean exactly? When we see, and I saw the map on CNN, and they had all the arrows pointing right back up into Louisiana and moving the oil back that way. In a situation like that, so the oil is pushed toward there, as soon as the storm passes, does then the natural flow of going back to the correct stream or flow of the water pull it back away from the area? Is it there long enough to cause the damage? What happens in a situation like this?
Well, these different wind patterns can really break up the spill, and you have to realize that the spill doesn't look like this table. It's not one contiguous blob, if you will, of oil. It's broken up into several different smaller chunks. That wind coming from offshore into shore is going to cause it to get back, and I think of it more of pushing further into tidal inlets, further up tidal streams, getting more potentially into more of the estuary habitats, even into some freshwater tidal marshes, pushing it further inland. As the wind changes, you're not going to see that continual press, if you will, but it will eventually pulse back out of the system.
Yeah, and there's no set pattern. As when the hurricane passes, there's no set pattern as to which way the wind will blow at the end of each hurricane. So, you may get a northerly wind that would push it farther offshore again, which would be a bit of a relief. Or, you could even get an easterly flow. Another front could come in and coming from the west and push it towards the east again. Yeah. And the biggest issue with a hurricane coming in that concerns me is that if it comes in sort of directly at the Mississippi Delta, and you have the dirty side out in the ocean, and it's circulating and pushing a wave front, and it refracts into the beach, what it does is it creates something we call a longshore current by squeezing the water like that, and it'll push it to the east. And what that will do is actually move the oil much more quickly laterally along the beaches, and it'll affect more beaches down the coast of Florida than we would like to see happen. And that could be a very strong current. And, for example, if you've ever been to the beach and you jump up and down in the water and it seems like your blanket's moving, it's because the longshore current's picking you up when you jump up in the water, and it's moving you along. And when we have hurricanes come in, that force is even greater because the wave energy is much stronger, and the force of the refraction and squeezing, so to speak, of the water to create that longshore current. If it flows to the east, it would be bad. Now, if a hurricane came up along Florida from the other direction, it could actually push it back towards Mississippi and away from Florida. So the trajectory is very important.
Last question before I leave this whole area. The hurricane can in some way help us out by dispersing the oil in some degrees?
Yeah, in the overall sense, it will disperse a lot of the oil because the wind energy and the wave energy will break it up and deconcentrate it. So from a global or large-scale perspective, it's actually deconcentrating the mass. And I'll let Jeff explain that, it can also funnel water and oil into places that would be damaging to the environment, like the head of an estuary.
Exactly.
So better or worse having the hurricane go through that as far as the slick itself?
Overall better, but locally it could be worse.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. Yeah. You can see increase in weathering. So as soon as this oil starts moving up through the water column, it starts to evolve. It starts to decompose. It starts to give off volatile hydrocarbons, and it begins to evaporate once it gets to the surface. The wind, the wave action can continue that weathering process. The longer it weathers, the less toxic, the less volatile that oil will be when it gets to the marine end member or potentially into the estuaries. Obviously, the storm will force it farther into, so there would be your negative effect.
And the smaller the drops, the greater the surface area per volume, so bacteria can act on it much more quickly.
Okay, another big area that was going on right before the storm became the big topic was this moratorium on drilling. And Michelle, I want to talk to you a little bit about that. First of all, as I understand it, it was a 6-month moratorium on. Is it deep water drilling in just the Gulf, or was it for the whole country?
It was deep water. Well, the only place where we can drill is the central and western Gulf of Mexico. So first of all, this is the only area that is affected. Every other part of the country, there aren't a set of rules. There isn't a congressional action that allows the U.S. Minerals Management Service to lease anywhere else currently. Okay, that's what was being debated before all of this happened. So the moratorium was a 6-month moratorium. It was applied to deep water areas, not shallow water wells, and not the producing facilities that are already there. So this affected about 33 rigs, 33 operations that were drilling in new blocks and new locations that qualified under the ban, which was rejected by the courts.
So basically what we had was okay, but we weren't going to get any more. is what the ban was saying. Correct?
Well, the idea was to put a pause in the action on exploration in deepwater blocks while everyone tried to sort through all of this. The problem, of course, is that has lots and lots of consequences for all of the related services, employees, investment, and companies and local businesses and everything that are attached to those 33 rigs and 33 locations. It's a substantial an economic dislocation on top of everything else going on. I mean, I think one of the things that people are slowly starting to understand about our region is that a lot of people here in coastal communities in Louisiana and East Texas in particular rotate through two industries, fishing, farming, and other related onshore businesses, and then offshore. And the offshore businesses have largely carried a lot of the coastal economies over the years. So it's a double hit, which is why the whole issue of compensation and that sort of thing has
let me understand. So then sensitive. The judge in New Orleans had the right to block a federal presidential mandated order.
He had a right to block something that was being executed through the U.S. Department of Interior. And then basically throws it back to the executive branch to rethink and either try to appeal or come up with a different solution.
And then the White House did appeal this, correct?
I think the appeal is in progress. I don't think it has actually happened yet. I think there's a good amount of rethinking going on about this. But in the meantime, there's now a broader political dynamic in pushing for ways of restricting drilling, either outright or through policy or regulatory actions that would severely constrain the flow of investment into offshore exploration and production. So there are proposals on the House in the House by Representative Waxman, for instance, the Blowout Prevention Act, which everyone has been looking at today. There are competing proposals from other members of Congress. To some extent, those proposals would serve as a brake on action on the flow of investment as we're accustomed to.
While all of this is going on, though, is the New Orleans judge's ruling law currently?
The judge's ruling stands currently.
So they can start, but no one wants to because they don't know how it's going to go.
Of course.
Correct?
Right. So what's happening is, of course, people are trying to renegotiate contracts on rigs as much as they can. The uncertainty being what it is, companies are trying to move equipment and people to other global locations where they can operate. They're trying to move forward contracts that they have in other countries, other regions. And basically, I think what we will see anyway is a diminishing of activity just simply because the policy uncertainty is.
And while all of this is going on, we hear reports about skimmer ships from other places coming in to be used and not being utilized, that there's what's going on. Any of you have any insight into these stories of there is additional help out there that we are not utilizing? Is that true? Is that false from your points of view?
We have in place in the United States something that we all fondly call the Jones Act. The Jones Act restricts certain kinds of shipping activities in U.S. waters to operations that include U.S. crews. And there are a lot of historic reasons for that have to do with merchant seaman labor and other things. And there's a lot of debate around this, and I am not going to pretend here to be an authority or to try to answer what has kind of become sort of a lightning rod on some of these things. But my understanding is that there were offers that were made. I mean, at a time like this, everybody around the world is going to make offers of equipment and personnel and technology and all of that sort of thing. But in this case, we have a technicality that has prevented the deployment of some of that, and a variety of reasons that have to do with our own internal domestic policies on
So
labor
then
and
there
labor
are-
protections that have prevented us from taking advantage of those offers.
There are things, and I say things because the variety of what it
Right.
could be are out there
Yes.
that possibly could be being utilized and aren't because of a statute that's in place that says we can't.
Or the way the statute is being used or interpreted.
Yes,
Okay.
and on Wednesday there was a news release from the government that they are actually evaluating a lot of these offers and that they will push forward the utilization of some of these things, and they actually came out with an approved list of countries and equipment that they could use. And one of the things that they were adamant about was that they are using booms from Mexico, and Mexico gave them to us for free.
Okay, which takes me, and we always say it at the end of our show, that if you have questions, that you're free. And we did get some questions in, so I want to hit a couple of these before we run out of time. And first of all, of course, the long-term effect of this spill, we really can't tell right now what all of this is going to mean when it's all over, but we do know it's going to be pretty devastating, correct?
Yes, it will be.
Yeah, we really don't know, as you said, and it's going to vary along the coast. What you see in certain areas in Louisiana might be much different from what we see in Mississippi or even to Florida. It's going to vary by the type of habitat you're in, and different parts of the system will respond differently.
I'll get back to these in a minute, but that brings up another point I wanted to address with you again, is the dispersants. The use of these dispersants are altering what's happening, but as it's been noted, this has never been used on this kind of a scale before. Right. Do we have yet any idea what kind of damage could be coming from using simply the dispersants? Any way to figure that?
There has been some research that's looked at a combination of oil, dispersed oil, and solely just oil on vegetation. That research has shown that dispersant is just about as toxic to plants as an oil would be. However, oil that has had dispersant applied to it is the more advantageous route, so to speak. When oil is applied with dispersant, it's a little bit better for the system. However, we're not talking at nearly the concentrations that we see that are currently being used in the Gulf.
Okay. Back to our Facebook questions. With all the public and expert ideas coming for recovery and repair coming in, how do we evaluate what will work and what we try as a government and what BP decides? Does anyone know how that's evaluated?
Well, that, I think, is the job of the Presidential Commission to some extent, at least as a first pass. But I have lots of concerns about that, which we sort of talked about separately last week, or the last time that we taped, I think. I'm not comfortable that the best minds in the petroleum business are being captured by government right now for a variety of reasons, except for the recovery effort and all the close working relationships between all of the companies and the U.S. Minerals Management Service.
Don, you had a reaction to that statement.
But that's...
Well, yeah, it's there seems to be an absence of petroleum scientists and petroleum engineers in a lot of the reviews, and a lot of large, big-powered, well-known scientists that may have no background in the oil industry at all, and that's a little bit of a concern because it's even like if you imagine medicine, there's specialists in every field, and science is the same way. We have, and even within a given science, within engineering, we have specialists. So it's very important that you have the best minds. There's an Academy of Science of Petroleum Engineers, and I actually converse with some of them just to find out if some of these ideas make sense or not, and to do some ground truthing of my own with them. But I haven't heard. It doesn't mean it's not happening, but I haven't heard that there are a lot of these kind of people being used to actually evaluate some of these ideas. And one of the ideas, of course, was to use a nuclear explosion, and that kind of made me shudder because, when Russia did it, it was after a well was blowing up for a very, very long period of time. They had a lot of time to think about it, but most importantly, it was in rocks that were very hard. The grains were cemented together, and when the explosion went off, it kind of rumbled, and that was it. But the sediment that we have out in the Gulf of Mexico is like Jell-O, and if you shake it, it will shake violently. In California, where we have the most earthquake damage, is where you have soft sediment sitting around hard sediment or hard rocks, and they shake a little bit, but the soft sediment severely shake, and you can have roads that don't collapse in the hard rocks and they collapse in the soft rocks. And the point is that if you put a weapon with it's 4 to 6 on the Richter scale into the ocean, aside from worrying about shaking the coastline so much that you'll have severe landslides coming off of the shelf. I mean, major. I couldn't even imagine how bad it would be.
And we talked about this because that's one thought to close the well is to explode it, and then it'll collapse in on itself, and that would help it. We have less than a minute to go, and I know you came with props, and the props help explain too. I want to come at it from the relief wells that are being drilled seem to be the best and really only answer at this point, correct?
Yes, and one of the things that, I don't know if you can see that, but one of the issues with the well that was drilled, the Macondo well that blew out, was that they used what we call liners. Now, normally when we drill a well, we have full string casing, so you drill an interval and you put the casing in, then you drill another interval below that, and you put the casing in, and it's sealed at the top, and it goes all the way down to the bottom, and cement comes up along the annulus of the well bore and then into the annulus with the other casing. So it's a solid, firm thing. Now, when you do something with liners, you take a piece of casing, and the next piece of casing is threaded through it, and you
got about 5 seconds left to show me.
And you simply just put it right here. So the well bore is articulated with weak cement joints, and that's
what happened.
That's what happened with the well.
In the relief wells, are they going to correct
the relief
that?
wells, they had liner in it, and they took it out. They were planning on doing it in May, and they're not there now. They put real casing in.
All right, thank you. We are out of time again. Unfortunately, I think you'll probably all be back to join us again as this continues to go on. I don't see any immediate end in sight. Thank you all very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Each week we invite you to join us at our home online at HoustonPBS.org. Simply click on the local programs bar, pick Houston 8, and you can join our online community where you can read about the guests, learn more about the topic, share your thoughts and ideas, and even suggest questions that we might ask during upcoming episodes. Remember, information posted on our website may be used on air, so keep that in mind when submitting. That does it for us tonight. Until next week, I'm Ernie Manous. Thank you for joining us.